Amelia Harper grew up invisible, carrying humiliations and secrets only she understood. The daughter of a janitor, she studied on her own, dreaming of recognition behind closed doors. Until one unexpected morning changed everything and put her courage to the test. Want to find out how this ordinary woman became a global role model? Subscribe to the channel and follow this inspiring story. It was morning in New York, and the sky reflected the same metallic shine as the buildings surrounding the city's financial heart. Ethan Collins adjusted his tie with the precision of someone who controlled everything around him, or at least believed he did. That day, a billion-dollar contract would decide the future of his company. Screens displayed numbers as if they were the vital signs of a tense body. He was the man with the answers, the millionaire with a firm voice and cold stare. But sometimes, the universe likes to test the pride of those who think they're above mistakes. And it was right there, at the peak of power, that the first thread of humiliation began to unravel. The conference room smelled of luxury and anxiety. Swiss watches, leather folders, and gazes worth fortunes. The international team was waiting for the official interpreter, a highly paid specialist hired to make sure nothing went wrong. But time, ruthless as always, didn't wait. The clock ticked on, and the man who was supposed to translate everyone's fate simply didn't show up. An uncomfortable silence took over the room. Ethan, used to commanding with a simple nod, felt something he hadn't felt in years: loss of control. A bead of sweat ran down his temple, and he realized that power is sometimes just a well-dressed illusion. Foreign investors exchanged words in French and Mandarin, growing impatient. Ethan tried to hide it, but every second without translation was like a needle piercing his reputation. One executive stared at him with that look that mixes pity and judgment, the kind of look a millionaire hates more than any defeat. "Where's the interpreter?" one of the directors asked, dryly. Ethan responded with a tense smile, but it couldn't carry the weight of the moment. And there, the secret began, the fear of being seen not as a business genius, but as someone vulnerable, ordinary, human. Voices grew louder. The language confusion turned the meeting into a silent battlefield. Ethan stood, trying to assert authority. "Gentlemen, please, one moment," he said, in a tone mixing desperation and pride. The translator still hadn't arrived. Papers piled up, phones vibrated with impatient messages, and chaos threatened to swallow everything. For the first time, he tasted the bitter flavor of humiliation in the very showcase of success. It was as if fate was whispering a reminder: behind every empire, there is an invisible weakness waiting for the right moment to show itself. Meanwhile, glances crossed like blades. No one wanted to be the first to admit failure. Ethan felt the weight of it pressing down through the partner's eyes. The flawless billionaire began to crumble inside, unaware that the deepest lesson of his life was about to enter the room, with light, almost imperceptible steps. He, who valued titles, status, and numbers so highly, was about to learn that power doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes, it carries a bucket and a rag. The air conditioning seemed to blow irony. Words in Mandarin grew harsher, the French whispered, and Ethan watched his empire collapse in slow motion. He tried to improvise, gesturing, laughing, but nothing got through. The world seemed to mock him along with the investors, and humiliation settled in for good. One of his assistants whispered, "Should I call someone from reception, sir?" Ethan just closed his eyes for a second. The millionaire who commanded markets was being defeated by something money couldn't buy: communication. And no one there seemed to have the key to unlock the chaos. Time turned into an enemy. The meeting, scheduled to last an hour, had already dragged on over 30 tense minutes. Ethan watched the investors' confidence evaporate. One of them picked up a folder and muttered something in French that, even without translation, sounded like waste of time. His pride cracked a little more. He thought of all the nights spent working, the victories displayed in magazines, and how, suddenly, everything could fall apart in minutes. It was a cruel lesson. Sometimes, humiliation doesn't come to destroy, but to reveal what was hidden in silence. On the wall, the mirror reflected Ethan's image, impeccable, but hollow. Behind the shine of his watch and tailored suit, there was a man on the edge of collapse. And in the corner of the room, a discreet figure watched silently. Amelia Harper, the cleaning lady, collected empty cups and crumpled papers, invisible as always. She listened to the nervous voices, understood every word, and one detail made her shiver. She could help. But who would listen to a janitor in the middle of a billionaire's crisis? Ethan ran his hand through his hair, staring at the contract slipping from his grasp. He tried calling the interpreter one more time. Nothing. The silence on the other end of the line seemed to mock him. That's when he heard, faintly, a female voice murmuring something in French. Clear, precise, natural. He looked up. For a moment, he couldn't tell if it was real. Amelia spoke softly, but every word seemed to fall into the air like a rope thrown to a shipwrecked man. The millionaire, unknowingly, was about to find salvation in anonymity, something luxury had never given him. Tension exploded into held-back breaths. The investors exchanged glances, recognizing something familiar, yet surprising, in the voice. Ethan turned toward the corner of the room and saw Amelia, still in her gray uniform, with a calm expression. The woman no one noticed had just taken the first step toward changing everything. What she said next would mark the start of a turnaround no one, least of all Ethan, would ever forget. Amid the chaos, while executives scrambled with calls and apologies, Amelia Harper continued sweeping a corner of the room, pretending not to see anything. The mop gliding across the floor was almost a disguise for what she felt, a mix of empathy and helplessness. For years, she had learned to hide in plain sight, a talent born of living on the margins. Silent humiliation was part of the uniform. Among muffled laughs and glances that passed through her, Amelia carried a secret no one imagined. She understood every word spoken in French and Mandarin. And at that moment, something inside her began to pulse differently, as if life whispered, "Now." As billionaire Ethan Collins tried to maintain his composure, Amelia noticed the anguish in his eyes. For a moment, she felt pity, not for the rich man, but for the human being weighed down by his own pride. She knew what it was to feel small in front of others, to taste rejection and doubt. Perhaps that's why her compassion overcame her fear. The mop fell from her hand. Her heart raced. The entire world seemed to pause to witness her courage being born. What no one saw was that, at that exact moment, the invisible woman was waging an internal battle between the habit of silence and the desire to be heard. "Madam, je peux vous aider?" The words slipped out almost unintentionally, soft but firm. The silence that followed was so thick you could hear the air being cut. Ethan raised his eyes slowly, confused. A cleaning lady, speaking French? The scene seemed impossible. The assistant next to him widened his eyes, and one of the foreign investors turned, surprised, with a contained smile. Amelia swallowed hard. She hadn't planned any of this, but courage is often a reflection of the soul when fear tires of winning. The next few seconds felt like hours. Ethan hesitated, but before he could react, the investors started asking questions, and Amelia, without faltering, answered naturally. She translated, explained, mediated. Every word she spoke was a brick rebuilding the confidence that had shattered minutes before. The atmosphere began to change. Tension turned into attention. The millionaire, unknowingly, was watching a silent lesson in humility. Because sometimes, the greatest lesson comes from the least expected, and those who understand lost the most know best about starting over. She didn't wear an important badge or a stylish blazer, but she had an authority born of truth. Amelia spoke with a respect that disarmed. French flowed like music, Mandarin came naturally, a product of countless nights studying alone in public libraries. The disbelief in the room shifted into admiration. Ethan barely blinked. He seemed hypnotized. A small secret of fate revealed itself. Power changes form when courage decides to show up. And at that moment, power rested entirely in the hands of a woman with a bucket by her side. Executives whispered among themselves. Some smiled awkwardly, others discreetly filmed the scene on their phones. History was unfolding before them, and no one yet knew the full extent of the turnaround they were witnessing. Amelia took a deep breath and kept translating, steady, as if this had always been her place. The contrast was symbolic, the silent millionaire, and the cleaning lady steering the company's fate. It was the kind of irony only life could write, the humiliation inverted, power redistributed. Amid technical terms and billion-dollar figures, Amelia felt something strange growing in her chest. Peace. Not fear, not shame, peace. Perhaps because, for the first time, she wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. She was simply being what she had always been, someone with knowledge and courage. And curiously, her simplicity disarmed the room. The negotiation resumed, fluid and respectful. The millionaire watched, unsure whether to thank her or apologize. But something stronger than pride was happening there, admiration. "You learned this where?" Ethan murmured when she paused. Amelia smiled without taking her eyes off the paper. "Cleaning tables and listening to old radios. The words always followed me, even when people didn't," she replied, in a calm, almost poetic tone. The sentence hung in the air, and the millionaire felt the weight of a truth no money could buy. In that moment, he realized that not all talent is born in offices. Some are born in silence, in the middle of being overlooked. The meeting ended without further interruptions. The investors stood up, smiling, exchanging compliments. Ethan, still not fully understanding everything that had just happened, simply nodded his thanks. Amelia picked up the mop she had dropped, as if collecting a piece of her own story. Chaos had turned into respect, and the woman everyone had ignored was now the center of a secret impossible to hide. And the most beautiful part? She didn't even seem to realize the magnitude of what she had done. As the executives left the room, a soft murmur ran through the corridor. "Who is that woman?" No one knew the answer. Only Ethan remained standing, watching her from afar, as if witnessing the beginning of something that would change the course of many lives. Deep down, he felt he had witnessed not just a translation of words, but a translation of life itself, the unexpected transforming humiliation into rebirth. And without knowing it, Amelia had just opened the door to the destiny that had waited for her for years. Amelia's voice echoed through the glass hall like a breath of balance. Every phrase that left her lips seemed to align what had once been chaos. French and Mandarin flowed together in a precise dance, moving with rhythm and confidence. The investors, once restless, now watched her with respect, that rare respect born of genuine surprise. Ethan stood still, observing as if watching his own fortune being reshaped before his eyes. The billionaire who once commanded time was now bound to the rhythm of the woman who cleaned the floors. And unknowingly, he was about to experience the greatest lesson of his life. Amelia no longer trembled. The fear that had once silenced her seemed to have turned into light. She gestured subtly, explaining technical terms with the confidence of a specialist. The foreign executives exchanged impressed glances, and one even stood to shake her hand. Ethan watched the scene like someone witnessing a miracle, not the miracle of luck, but of competence hidden behind a uniform. The humiliation that had surrounded him just minutes before was now only a distant memory. Power had shifted, and he felt it in every breath. "Please continue," said one of the investors, smiling in French. Amelia nodded, focused, serenity written across her face. The translation continued flawlessly. Ideas began to flow, numbers made sense, expressions relaxed. It was as if every word she spoke stitched together the broken pieces of that morning. Ethan crossed his arms, silent, and a thought struck him. How could so much talent go unnoticed? The answer came with a bitter truth, because the world doesn't always see those who don't wear a suit. With every phrase she translated, Amelia rewrote the destiny of the company, and of Ethan himself. It was curious to observe, the same silence that had once hidden her now crowned her. The secret of years, the knowledge kept, the solitary study, the talent without a stage, finally found a voice. And in that room, where money dictated the rules, what shone was something money cannot buy: dignity. The millionaire, now silent, watched like a student before a teacher life had sent unexpectedly. He felt pride giving way to something new, genuine admiration. The investors resumed discussing contract terms, but now with a different tone, light, productive, confident. Amelia was the bridge connecting worlds. French became poetry, Mandarin, melody. The entire room breathed relief. Ethan leaned discreetly and whispered to his assistant, "Don't let anyone interrupt." For the first time in a long while, he wasn't commanding, he was learning. Unknowingly, he was being transformed by something greater than success, the recognition of human value. During the negotiation, Amelia remembered all the times she had been ignored, the disguised jokes, the conversations interrupted when she walked in with her cleaning cart. This was more than a professional moment, it was redemption. Every word she translated carried the weight of past humiliation, and every respectful glance erased a little of the invisible scars. A new strength surged inside her, a kind of victorious calm. The past no longer hurt. It was as if life had finally paid its debt. The clock marked the end of the meeting, and the silence that followed was reverent. The contract, once at risk, was signed with praise and applause. Ethan took a deep breath, unsure whether to laugh or cry. He extended his hand to Amelia, hesitant. "You saved everything," he said, in a tone more human than he had ever used. Amelia smiled simply. "I just did what I knew how to do," she replied, and that light sentence carried immense power. It was the final lesson of the morning. Sometimes, the extraordinary hides in the simple. When the investors left, the hall was empty, yet the air still pulsed. Ethan approached, curious, with a look between gratitude and disbelief. "Where did you learn all this?" he asked. Amelia wiped her hands with the rag, as if returning to reality. "In the places no one looks. You learn a lot when the world expects nothing from you," she said, and walked away, leaving the millionaire standing, thoughtful. The sound of her footsteps felt like a confession. For the first time, he saw himself as small and free. What he didn't know was that that morning would mark the start of a transformation that would change more than contracts. Ethan Collins would begin to see people differently. And Amelia, without realizing it, had just been noticed by someone with the power to change her destiny forever. The millionaire, touched by something he didn't fully understand, decided he would find out who this woman really was, the one who spoke so many languages and lived in silence. As she walked down the corridor with the bucket in hand and a light heart, Ethan kept his gaze on her. There was something poetic about the contrast. The simple woman carrying a secret, and the rich man who, for the first time, felt poor in certainty. The world outside remained the same, but inside that room, something had changed forever. And destiny, subtle as always, was already preparing their next encounter, a meeting that would reveal the true power behind that calm-eyed cleaning lady. There was a box at the back of Amelia's wardrobe she had never opened since the day she left home. It was small, made of dark wood, smelling of dust and memory. Inside slept letters, a torn photograph, and a badge with the name she had left behind. No one in the city knew that before becoming the discreet woman at the school, she had once been almost someone else, someone who dreamed too big. Sometimes the past doesn't die, it only falls silent. And hers had learned to whisper in the exact tone that guilt carries. That night, the sound of the wind seemed to call for answers. Amelia sat at the edge of the bed, holding the box lid with trembling fingers. She hadn't cried in years, but there was something in that moment. The same smell of disinfectant, the same sound of hallways, that brought everything back. The school where she now worked was the same one where her father had been a janitor. Irony followed her like a faithful shadow. On the same floor where the old man had cleaned other people's steps, she now left her own, trying not to make too much noise. The secret began there, in the quiet love for a father who was never seen as a whole man. Amelia had grown up hearing laughter echoing through the halls, jokes from wealthy students, and sharp remarks from haughty teachers. "Your father is the janitor," they would ask. She would respond with a smile that had already become armor. Inside, she swore she would get out of there. She swore she would never see that blue uniform again. But life, in its subtle irony, made her inherit not the uniform, but the floor. And it was on that floor that she learned the value of footprints. Her father died young, too early to see the diploma she earned, late enough to leave behind guilt that time could not heal. Amelia never forgave him for giving up, for shrinking from the world. But now, years later, sweeping the room where he had swept, She understood. He hadn't given up. He had just grown tired of fighting alone. This revelation didn't arrive as light, but as an echo. It was late at night, and the open box seemed to breathe. Inside lay a letter addressed to her, never read. The handwriting was firm, the script of someone who learned through effort and hope. Daughter, if one day you understand what it means to clean the floor, you will understand what it means to start over. Amelia read, and the floor seemed to give way beneath her. Her father hadn't left just a job, he had left a lesson coded in the dust. Starting over wasn't stepping backward. It was a way of honoring. At that moment, she realized that the silence she carried wasn't fear, it was reverence. The kind of love that doesn't need noise to be immense. Memories came in waves. The last conversation, the hurried goodbye, swallowed pride. Everything blended with the image of her now. The woman time had bent, but not broken. Amelia realized the secret she had carried wasn't one of crime, nor shame. It was the secret of an invisible lineage, those who keep the world standing while no one watches. The inheritance of the silent. And understanding that was also about accepting herself. In the morning, arriving at school, she walked down the corridor as always. But something had changed. Her steps sounded different, almost solemn. She paused in front of the trophy room, where the names of past principals shone on golden plaques. No name like her father's. No name like hers. And it was there she decided. She didn't want to be remembered for titles, but for the act of someone who, one day, dared to stand where everyone expected her to kneel. Later, in the empty courtyard, a student dropped a book. Amelia bent down to pick it up. The reflection in the window showed the old badge clutched in her hand, the same one from the box. She put it in her pocket. Not for nostalgia, but for justice. The name once hidden would now walk with her. It was a symbol of a silent reconciliation between what had been and what could still be. At dusk, the sky looked like a cracked mirror, half light, half shadow. Amelia watched the students leave, each carrying a future in their hands, and thought of her father. She thought of how proud he would have been to see her there, not for how far she had come, but for not forgetting where she came from. And then, for the first time, she allowed herself to smile without sadness. The secret was revealed, and it no longer hurt. What hurt was having kept it hidden. That night, before turning off the lights, she placed the empty box on the top shelf. What had once held pain now held space. Amelia looked at her reflection in the mirror, the same woman, but with a new gaze. The silence inside her was no longer a prison, it was a refuge. And when she turned off the last light, she whispered her father's name, as if in thanks. Because sometimes, the secret isn't what we hide. It's what we finally learn to say in peace. The next morning brought a different kind of silence. Amelia entered the building with firm steps, free from the weight of doubt that had accompanied her for years. Ethan, still impressed, waited at the entrance, eyes attentive. The millionaire who once evaluated contracts was now evaluating human possibilities. Amelia, we need to discuss the international department, he said, with genuine respect. She smiled discreetly, recalling every humiliation, every ignored glance that had shaped her. Every step she took down that corridor was a living life lesson, a story told without words. Sitting across from Ethan, she realized that the world that had once seemed impenetrable was now becoming pliable. Negotiations, spreadsheets, international meetings, all seemed part of a new rhythm, a dance she finally knew how to lead. The millionaire's pride mingled with curiosity. "How did you study so much without formal schooling?" he asked, still surprised. Amelia only laughed, a light laugh, filled with years of secrets kept in public libraries and radio recordings. Every answer of hers reshaped the company's idea of merit. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Amelia studied at night, read, learned protocols, and honed her skills. Each achievement was quietly celebrated, but every inner victory rang like a trumpet. Ethan watched in admiration, unaware that the real miracle wasn't in immediate results, but in the gradual transformation of the woman who once served coffee in silence. Her old humiliation had become fuel. She felt the world was finally beginning to recognize the strength of someone who learns to shine without asking permission. The invitation to speak at an international conference arrived like a fresh breeze. Amelia hesitated. Stage, audience, lights, all that she had avoided for years. But remembering her father, the corridor, the boxes with letters, and the old badge, she took a deep breath. "If not me, who?" she whispered. Stepping onto the stage, she felt attentive eyes as if each carried a silent expectation. The lesson of invisibility transformed into a living example. The entire room held its breath while her voice, firm and clear, guided every thought. Her words were not just translations or explanations, they were stories of overcoming. Every sentence carried the memory of endured humiliation, every smile hid a secret of determination. The audience was moved, some to tears, others with knowing smiles. Ethan watched from the back, amazed, sensing a turnaround that no contract could teach. The woman who had once swept corridors now made hearts beat with the intensity of a silent miracle. International recognition came slowly, but steadily. Amelia was invited to strategic boards, global panels, and even academic collaborations. Each diploma she earned was more than paper. It was proof that persistence and quiet faith can overcome barriers imposed by money, status, or judgment. She remembered, with warmth and a little laughter, every time she had been ignored. Unknowingly, all those moments had prepared her for this stage, for this recognition. Watching her rise, Ethan decided to share his own secret, the desire that everyone who enters the company be seen for what they know, not for the uniform they wear. Amelia smiled, recalling that first chaotic morning of translation. The lesson was complete. True greatness is measured by the courage of those who dare when no one expects it. Every look of admiration, every silent thank you from colleagues, was a bridge to the future she now walked without fear. In the international office, Amelia signed documents with confidence, led meetings, and guided teams. The girl who had grown up among empty corridors and indifferent glances had transformed into a global reference. Her secret, determination, and past humiliation now shone in the form of competence. Ethan approached often, not as a boss, but as someone who finally understood the value of the invisible. The millionaire realized that real wealth lay in Amelia's talent and courage. During visits to libraries, training rooms, and universities, Amelia inspired young people who, like her, had felt invisible. She told stories of silent corridors, hidden secrets, and lessons learned without formal degrees. Every word she spoke was like a beacon, proof that the impossible exists only until someone dares to try. The world that had once ignored her now bowed with respect, never forgetting the humble roots of her story. In the final scene of this chapter, Amelia looked out over the company building's horizon, remembering the floors she had swept, the old badge, and the smile of her father in her memories. She took a deep breath and smiled, knowing that this transformation was not just hers, it belonged to everyone who believes life can change when courage, faith, and purpose come together. And if you think this is the end, just wait to see what comes next, because destiny still holds surprises no one could imagine.